Part as to what pro-life means. A lot of people, I've seen several posts on Facebook and other things about being pro-life, but what does that mean? To me, it is a proactive term. It means that you have to do something to be pro-life. You can't just say it. You can't. You have to do something. So foster care means a lot to me, and Marcus and Luke and Raquel, Grace. We've all worked in the foster care system, and so God said to me, "You need to educate the community, the church, everybody, as to what foster care system is and what adoption is." There's a lot of things that are said that maybe you have thoughts in your head of what it is, and so I just wanted to clarify that today. And so anyway, so I had invited, or actually God put on my heart, Raquel and Grace, two of the most amazing women I have ever met. They have amazing stories of how God's led them in their lives, and so that's why we're here. That's why we're here on an Orphan Sunday. So if Raquel wants to come up.
Good morning. So I've got some notes with me today. Yeah, if you have one, that would be good. So foster care, something I'm pretty passionate about, so having some notes is kind of to keep me on track so that I don't keep you guys here all day. So first I just want to thank you for allowing me to come and speak today, and Janae and Marcus. We got to know each other through Little League, of all things, and God just started kind of working and moving in our relationship. Janae and I were talking about our kids, and that led to, well, do you think you'll have more kids? And I was like, well, yeah, we're going to do foster care, and then that just kind of opened the floodgate, and it was kind of all over from there for us. So the more that I got to know them, I learned that Marcus was a caseworker, and I learned that Janae had been a caseworker, and then Janae started kind of pushing a little bit about, well, you've got a testimony with child welfare. Are you sure you don't want to be a worker? And as a kid, I didn't want anything to do with that. I was a foster kid myself. At age 7, I was removed from my biological mother and brought into foster care. It was a long, rough journey, and I'll probably get emotional. I apologize. But I didn't want to be a foster kid when I grew up. I didn't want that to be part of who I was. I didn't want really people to know about it. I just kind of wanted to move on, and I had a new family, and I was going to do something different. A little bit about my life. I came from a single mom, had a lot of criminal activity, drug use, domestic violence, never really had a stable place to stay, place to live. I think first grade I went to like 6 schools before I just stopped going. My grandmother got a DUI with me in the car. Just a lot of things that no kid should really ever have to go through, but unfortunately a lot of our kids see and do experience. I think there were several hotline reports before I finally got removed from my biological mother. And I can still remember the day that the Dcfs worker came and said, you're going to come with me. And I didn't really know what was going on. And I arrived at a strange place with strange people that I'd never met. And kids are running up to me, you're going to be my sister. And I'm, it's kind of a crazy experience. I say that because there's certain parts of foster care that other people don't really think about. Like, we know that kids get taken, they get put in new families, but there's parts of it that aren't pretty that a lot of people don't really think about. I was very fortunate. I didn't have siblings. Many of our kids, when they come into care, they're big groups, so it's 4 or 5 or more, and we don't have homes that can take that many, so they're torn apart. It's a huge burden that we deal with as caseworkers, is when we have to take kids and separate them and put them with different families, and they're not going to see each other very much. So I say all that to say that I was very fortunate. I arrived at an amazing foster home. My parents are incredible people. I stayed with them for about 1.5 years, and the court decided that it was time for me to go back to my biological mother. was not something that I wanted, but I didn't have a say. You're 8.5, and the court gets to make that decision. So I returned home. Things got much worse before I came into care. And it ended up, my mom was arrested, and so I got to come back into care. Luckily, my foster family got so attached to me in that 1.5 years that they reserved a spot in their house, and they weren't going to take any other kid because they just knew that there was a chance that I was going to be back. So I was very fortunate. I got to return to the same foster home, which that's very rare for our kids. Most of the time, by the time that they're back, that the foster home is filled up because there's so many kids that are waiting. So I spent 7 years in the system through foster care, luckily always with the same foster family. But it was hard. I had court all the time. I had to go to visits with my biological mom. And at first, when you're 7, you love your parents. You don't think that what they were doing was wrong, and I didn't see that what the life I came from, that there was anything wrong with it. So it was a struggle at first. I really loved her, and I wanted to be with her, but then the more I stayed with my foster family, the more I loved them, and I saw, well, wow, like this is what a family is, and this is what having a bedtime is, and going to school every day, and all of those things. So there's kind of this internal conflict that starts, where you feel like if you become loyal to your new family, that you're defying your old family, and that's kind of a really rough thing that a lot of our kids go through as well. Just trying to figure out, like, what do I want? And sometimes they still don't get a say. So it's a very difficult process. After 7 years, at age 13, I was finally able to be adopted. My biological mother's rights were terminated. And I got adopted by my family. That's incredible. It was a long journey, but through that journey, I started going to church while I was with my foster parents. And the story of Jesus just really kind of captivated me as a young person. Today we've sang about, "You are so, so good, and it is well with my soul," and all of those things that I resonate with now. As a kid, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know God as so, so good, and I didn't know him as so well, because when you have all the trauma going on in your life, you don't see the goodness. And so the more that I learned the gospel and I heard the story of Christ, the more that kind of transformed me. And I just became very passionate. I mean, my mom and dad would find me in my room reading my Bible and praying and crying out to Christ. And, it was just this overwhelming feeling to just feel like that love for the first time. And it was different than the love from my parents that adopted me. It was this overwhelming, like there's nothing that you can ever do that's going to change that. And I think that's why the gospel really just took a hold of me. There's a song right now from Elevation Worship that I'm kind of listening to on repeat, but one of the lines of that song is, it says, "You took what the enemy meant for evil and you turned it for good." And I think that's what our testimonies are. All of us have gone through things, whether it's foster care or loss, poverty. I mean, all of us have a story. I think probably junior high, I started kind of getting a little bit of a skewed perception of Christ. I remember starting to think about goodness, and it had to be about how good I was, and that if I did something wrong, then I wasn't going to get heaven. And so I had a lot of spiritual maturity that happened as I got older, and I realized that there wasn't anything that I could do that could separate me from Christ. And that was really a growing process for me. So from there, it's kind of a big jump, but I'm gonna kind of transition into me becoming a caseworker. So I can still remember being at my interview and still kind of like, am I sure that I want to do this? Am I sure that I want to work with foster kids? And I remember them asking me at my interview, like, are you sure this job's not going to hit too close to home? And I think she had the best intentions when asking me, but she wanted to make sure that, when you see kids in situations that you've been in, is that going to be too much for you? Is that going to be too overwhelming? And I just kind of felt God speak to me in that, and I knew that I had a unique perspective. Like, I know what those kids are going through, And I also know what it's like to want your parents to do better and to change. And so that's a lot of what we do as well. We don't just work with the kids, but we get to work with the parents and try to inspire them to make the changes that are needed. So as soon as I started my job, I began praying for the families that I worked with, and I still do. Every day I pray for the parents and for the kids. I pray that God would come in and heal. A lot of this stuff is rooted so deep and it's generational. Just a little bit about the Dcfs foster care system. I don't know how much all of you know, but so we have like two types. There's placement and intact teams where we work. So an intact team is where something has happened and Dcfs has been called, but there's not enough to actually remove the children from the home. So this is kind of what Illinois is focusing on right now. They're trying to help families before it gets to the level that foster care is needed. So they're bringing in people that can, get them to rehab, help them with housing costs, all of those things. And then there's placement, and that's what me and Marcus work in. That's where abuse and neglect has occurred. It's already risen to that level where the children have to be removed. It's just not safe for them to stay there. So when we testify in court, we're taught to say, what is your job? What is your role? And my job is to assess for safety, permanency, and well-being of children. But it's so much more than that. We have to work with the entire family. So my job is to really try to correct those conditions, help the change occur to get kids back home. We have a series of court hearings that we go through. I won't get into all that. My husband thought that would bore you when we went over it this morning. But ultimately, a judge will set a goal. Typically, it's return home within 12 months. It can variate from that, and that's usually where we start. So we have a 12-month period where we're really trying to help families make corrections. So during that time, children are in foster care. So they're having visits with their parents, but they're ultimately living in another home with other people. Our kids come into care, and they have all experienced so many different things. Trauma can be a range. It can be domestic violence. It can be sexual abuse, physical abuse. One of the biggest things that I see is addiction. Addiction ravages families. And usually once addiction has got a hold on someone, then all of these other things start to follow. When you're addicted to something, then poverty becomes an issue because your money's not going where it needs to go. Or maybe you've lost your job. And maybe you're in a relationship with someone who's not treating you well. We see a lot of abuse that comes after people begin using. So it's just kind of this cycle that starts to happen, and unfortunately we have kids that get mixed up in it. So kind of one of the biggest things I hear a lot from other people is that they don't know if they could take a foster kid because, I don't know what they've seen or what they've been through or what they would maybe do in my house. It is something that people think about. But kids with trauma don't have to be defined by that trauma. So part of our job too is getting them services, getting them counseling, getting them involved in extracurricular activities and different outlets to get out some of the things that they've experienced. And I think one of the biggest things that I see with all of the kids that I work with is resiliency. I mean, someone this morning talked about, being like a child, and Christ talking about through the eyes of a child. Children are resilient. It's incredible to see the things that kids can go through, and given the right environment and a supporting, loving family, how they can completely come out of that. So from the court hearing, we set a goal. We have to create a service plan. In that service plan, we kind of have to spell out, what do these parents need to do to correct the conditions to get their kids back? And then we just start working with them on that right away. Really, it's ultimately up to the parents. You know, sometimes you have parents that their kid being removed is a wake-up call, and right away they're engaged in services. Other times we have parents that are so addicted, or, you know, they've been through so much trauma themselves, they're not ready to make the change. And so sometimes those kids don't get the return home goal. And then that foster care placement can turn into an adoptive. I just wanted to talk a little bit that it just takes a team of people. You know, it's not just social workers, it's not just foster parents. You know, the police are a huge help to us. They help us all the time. The court system, you know, judges have to make really tough decisions. You know, part of our job is creating a report to give to the judge and letting him kind of know what's going on with the family. The service providers, counselors, educators, I mean, everyone's important to work as a team to support families. So I think the reason that I think that this weighs maybe so heavily on Janae when she thinks about pro-life is just the fact that we're very limited on foster homes. We have kids coming into care at a much faster rate than we do of having new foster parents sign up. So sometimes it's a struggle. Sometimes we have kids at the office for several hours, even all night, while we're trying to find somewhere for them to go. You know, after a child's age 8, the difficulty to find a home for them is so much harder. You know, most people feel like, well, if I get a baby, you know, I can help change their behavior and help them change. You know, teenagers, it's so hard. It's so hard to find someone that is going to take a troubled teen that's been through a lot of hard stuff and it's probably angry. I talked about the separation of siblings, and then this whole COVID mess. It's affected everyone here. I know, I can tell you that. But when we have, you know, foster kids coming into care, foster parents are scared. They don't know where that child has been and what they've been exposed to. Even our residential facilities, our group homes, you know, they want kids to quarantine or do different things before they're able to accept them. So it's just been kind of this crazy time of trying to figure it out. I know the governor talked a little bit about, you know, when all these stay-at-home orders were in place, the child abuse went way up because kids weren't going to school. Kids weren't going out of the home where they had eyes on them all the time. So we saw a lot more cases of kids coming into care because they're home and things are difficult right now. So in conclusion, what do I hope that you take away from this today? Am I hoping that all of you run out and become foster parents? Well, of course I would love that, but that's not why I'm here. I don't think that everyone is called to be a foster parent. It takes a special kind of person, a special family. But there are many, many ways. I think my goal today is just kind of the awareness, is just getting people thinking about it. You know, it's not something that we kind of have to wake up and think about every morning, unless you're caseworkers like we are. But one thing that I wanted to talk about is reporting. So just to make sure everyone is aware, so there is a hotline that you can call at any time that you see a child that you think is being abused or neglected. And it's 800-25-ABUSE. I've got that pretty much drilled into my brain. But any time that you see a child that you're worried about, I just encourage you to call. You don't have to be the decision to make whether or not there's a safety concern. You know, there's qualified individuals on the other end of the phone that are going to do that. But I would encourage you to reach out and advocate for children. There are currently over 400,000 foster children in the United States, and over 18,000 of those are here in Illinois. There's currently over 3,000 kids in the state of Illinois that are ready to be adopted but don't have an adoptive family. So how can you help? I'd say the first step is really just making yourself aware. Start praying about it, praying for kids in this country, whether or not, you know, fostering is something that you're interested in, just praying for the awareness. You know, if you don't want to be a full-time foster parent, there's things like Respite, where we have homes where kind of like a transitional place. So we have a kid that comes in on the weekend, we don't have anywhere for them to go. You could be a respite just for them to stay for that weekend. It gives us more time to find a foster home. or sometimes foster parents just need a break. You know, they've got 6 foster kids and they're just really worn out. So sometimes we have families that are like, yeah, they can come stay with us for the weekend and hang out. And it just kind of gives our foster parents support. Donating time, donating funding, money, and just your support. You know, COVID's kind of a crazy time right now, but we always have parents that need a ride, or they're going to a job interview and they don't have anything to wear, or transportation is always huge. So there's a lot of different ways. I mean, I'm sure there's people in this community that need help with things like that. You know, there's single parents that maybe it's really close, making the ends meet. So back to the song that I quoted earlier, another line from that song from Elevation Worship. It says, I'm going to see a victory because the battle belongs to you, Lord. And I think that's kind of been my life's motto, is just knowing that, you know, it's not my battle. It can be overwhelming. There's nights where I'm sure Marcus can relate. You go home and you can't sleep that night because you have a kid on your brain, or you have a parent that you just can't get off your mind. And I just pray, because I know it's not my battle, and that it is in God's hands. So I just wanted to thank you guys for letting me come and share that with you. I think Grace is going to have some good information to share. Grace is a foster parent, so she's got a different perspective that she can kind of share with you guys. So thank you very much.
Hello? I don't know if I'm on. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Grace, and me and my husband have been licensed foster parents for 4.5 years now. And our lives have been marked by foster care and adoption in a few different ways. Growing up, I always told my family I wanted to adopt. I don't know where it even really started at, but I would say it started as young as 12 or 13 years old. And then in high school, I was given the chance to go to Mexico 3 different times on mission trips. And a lot of that time was spent in orphanages and like group homes, where we would give mattresses, shoes, eat with the kids, play with the kids, and that always left a really big impact on me. When I was 17, my parents sat us down and told us they were feeling like maybe they were meant to enter into the world of foster care. And wanted to make sure me and my other 2 sisters were on board. Of course we were. And on June 10th, 2011, my little sister, who is 10 now and was 10 months old at the time, came to live with us. She changed our lives forever. It was like God opened my eyes to a system that was literally like right in my backyard, where kids needed somewhere to be safe. And while they weren't orphans, they needed someone to care for them while they were waiting to be returned to family, if that was possible. It turns out that Olivia's family, biological family, wanted to give her a life they knew they couldn't. And only, I think it was 2 months after she came to live with us, they signed the rights over to my parents, and the adoption process began. And then in March of 2012, she became Olivia Hill, and she became a forever part of our family. Livy's my best friend. She's my sidekick. She goes everywhere with me. She helps me at work, and she makes us laugh continually. We just can't imagine our lives the last 10 years without her. Needless to say, the little tug and pull I felt to be part of the world of adoption turned into a yank and a booming loud voice that I couldn't ignore. In 2011, the same year Livy was adopted, at the age of 18, almost 18, I met my now husband Nathan, and we quickly realized it was a forever kind of thing we had going on. So I quickly realized I probably needed to tell him that I didn't necessarily feel like I wanted my own kids, and that my own biological kids that I wanted to adopt. And I remember being nervous and thought there would probably be some pushback. But he just looked at me, he said, I feel no differently about Livy than I do about your other 2 sisters or any of my family. And from then on, it was just kind of the plan. So in December of 2015, we'd been married for 2 years and a little more. we decided we were ready, and after the holidays in January of 2016, we started the process to become licensed foster parents with intentions of adoption if we got the opportunity. I immersed myself into the world of foster care and adoption. I read books and blogs and watched videos. I had a Pinterest board full of all of these things that I thought were going to change my life and make it easier. And after about 5 months of trainings, background checks, physicals, and home checks, we were given our license in May. Since then, we've had 7 kiddos come to our home, some of them super temporary, just for the weekend, and some of them forever. So in July of 2019, actually, we were able to finalize our oldest daughter's adoption. She is 10 now. And we're hoping in the next year to be able to complete the adoption of 2 of our kiddos that have been with us for over 4.5 years now. So here's what I've learned in the last 4.5 years, that no matter how many books you read, blogs you read, or how much information you read, you can't prepare yourself fully. Of course, that information helps, and knowing how to deal with behaviors or their emotions helps, but what these kids really need is just consistency. They need love. They need someone to be there to listen and just love them through it. I've learned that if God calls you, He will equip you. It may not be in the ways you thought it would be. I have days where I'm burnt out and tired and fried, and on those days, God has placed people to speak into our lives and our kids' lives and have given us extra boost to keep going. He gives you the tools you need when you need them. And I don't think Raquel knows this, but when we went out to eat and we were planning all of this, we were sitting there at the table and we were talking, and I said something like, a lot of times it's really hard for me to feel like I know what I'm doing. I came from a 2-parent family. I grew up in the church. I literally had like the golden standard of a childhood. I have no trauma. And I said that, and she looked at me and she was like, but you can model what a loving family looks like. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. So it's just amazing how God like puts those people in your life, like when you're least expecting it, that just gives you that little push that you need. I've learned that God is sovereign, more sovereign than I ever knew or thought He was. He puts every single step and play into motion. The kids that have been in our home have come not by chance. He placed them there for a specific amount of time and for a specific reason. So I would say just about 3 months ago, I was in a really dark place and I just felt done. I wanted to get this case pushed through to adoption and just tell them I was done. And I was sitting at work and I got a phone call, and it was our licensing worker, and she said, hey, we have 2 siblings and we are needing a place for them to go. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll call Nathan and see. You know, she said, even if it's really short term. She ended up finding a place for the little girl to go, but the 3-year-old needed a place to go. And I said, okay, well, she said, even if it's just for one night, just can he come stay with you for one? I was like, of course, sure. So they bring him over, and one night turns into 2 nights, and 2 nights turns into 3 nights, and then the next thing I knew, he had been with us for 3.5 weeks. And he ended up going to another placement, but he totally changed my heart in that time frame that he was with us. And I truly believe that God used him to help me realize that we weren't supposed to be done yet. 2 days after he left, me and my husband sat on the couch and reevaluated where we were, and talked about how we were both really feeling led to take a tiny baby at some point. And less than 48 hours later, I was in TJ Maxx shopping with Olivia, and I got a text, and it was them asking me to take a 4-week-old baby. And I text Nathan. He's like, okay, well, I think we're supposed to do that probably, since we were just talking about it. So I changed my direction from fall decorating shopping to the baby aisles very quickly. I've learned that foster parenting isn't for everyone. I know Raquel said that, but I'll never push people that don't feel led to foster to do it, because I truly believe it's something that God will put on your heart if you're supposed to. But I do believe that God calls us to help to serve the widows and the orphans. And there are all different ways to do that. That doesn't have to mean opening up your home to foster children. You can be a support system for foster families in your community. When we received our last placement, we were shown an outpouring of love. People messaged me telling me they were bringing diapers and they were dropping off swings and car seats and clothes, and it got to the point where I literally had to turn people away because our living room was stocked full of baby stuff. We had 2 families bring us meals in the first week because it's always an adjustment period, and it's hard when I have 3 other kids at home and a new placement. You just feel torn a lot of ways, and you want to be able to give your full attention to them. Let's see. You can become licensed to do Respite, which I know Raquel also talked about, which is very short term, usually just a day or 2 to either give foster parents a break. My parents, I know they took a baby for a week so a foster family could go on vacation, or even help if there's an emergency. You can pack duffel bags full of supplies for kids that come into care. A lot of these kids come into care and only have a few minutes to pack up all of their belongings. And a lot of times their belongings get stuffed in trash bags. And a duffel bag or any other type of bag adds some sort of dignity to that moment when everything they know is being ripped away from them. If you know a foster family, I just say simply ask if there's anything they need or anything you can do to help, because there's plenty of ways you can get involved. I would say the thing I hear the most, and people mean it with the most sincere, good intentions, but the thing I hear the most is, I could never do what you do. I just get too attached. And while I understand that, that is the whole point. You are supposed to get attached. You are supposed to show these kids love. They are supposed to feel safe with you and attached to you. You're supposed to love them, to let them become a part of your family for a time, to give them stability in hopes that they will attach. Research shows that if a foster child is able to attach to their foster family, it's a lot more likely that when they grow up and as they're growing up, they'll be able to form healthy attachments to other people. Does it hurt to say goodbye? Of course it does. Real bad. I know I just posted on Facebook or a couple days ago about the 3.5-year-old that we had, and like for the whole weekend after he left, I just kept like, I'm missing someone, and then I realized, oh, it's just he's gone, and like it will hit you, the grief will hit you, but I will say every single kid that's come through our house has been worth it. Seeing them grow, learn, laugh, and be loved at the most vulnerable point in their life will always make it worth it to me. The extra snuggles are pretty great too. Foster parents don't just love these kids while they're in their home, we love them after goodbye. Here's my challenge to you today. Today is a day that we recognize orphans and hopefully think of ways we can get involved as a church in the body of Christ to make an impact on the lives of children that need it. And while foster care isn't necessarily caring for orphans, these kids have families that love them but maybe just don't necessarily know how to love them. I would just ask you to get involved, because what if no one stepped up? What if no one welcomed these kids into their homes and lives, no matter how hard it is? Statistics show that 50% of foster care cases end up in adoption because kids cannot return home. If there was no families for these kids to go to, guess what they turn into? Orphans. Right now, in Illinois alone, there are over 3,000 kids waiting for adoption, rights terminated, just waiting for a family to become a part of. Could you be that family for them? One of the things I've heard over and over again is that my kids are lucky to have us. And while it is true that God has protected them from having to endure things and brought them out of hard places, they're not the blessed ones. We are. I can think of no other thing that I would feel honored to do more than love these kids when they need it the most. They taught me so much about how God loves us, cares for us, and ultimately wants us to love others. Because of adoption, I have a beautiful 10-year-old daughter, and God willing, I'll get to be the forever mama to a handsome 7-year-old and another beautiful 5-year-old. God has used adoption to stretch me, grow me, and ultimately make me put all of my faith and trust in Him. It's really funny. I leaned over to Janae. I actually have a tattoo on my arm that says, "It is well." So when that song was played this morning, I was like, Janae, that's literally the song for the past 4.5 years that I have clung to. I actually played it this morning while I was getting ready just to like prepare my heart a little bit. So I just thought that was really cool. It's another, God's in all the details. Let's see. Yes, my kids still have behaviors from years of trauma. Yes, there's nights we lay in bed and wonder if we made the right choice. Yes, there are nights where I'm literally just clinging to the hope of Jesus, but it's all been worth it. I challenge you today to think about ways you can get involved in your community and caring for kids that need it the most. You'd be surprised just how close they are to you. They're right here in Cesar, they're right here in Southern Illinois, and there are 3,000 right here in our state waiting for a family. Just pray over that and ask God what he wants you to do about it. I'm going to leave you with a post that I wrote on Facebook and my Instagram page last year sometime. It was just one of those days where I was sitting around and I was putting all these details together in my head, and I was just in amazement of how God had worked and is still working in our lives. I wrote, over the past week, I just haven't been able to stop thinking about Jesus and the way he writes our stories. When I was 16, my parents decided to become foster parents. They only ever had one placement, my baby sister Livy. She was adopted when she was a little over a year old. Little did I know, when I was 16, the same year my parents were getting licensed to take placements, my future daughter was being born in September. I never imagined that I would be sitting here, a 25-year-old with a 9-year-old, but God always knew. He knew that placing my little sister in our home would ignite a fire in my heart for children in care. I remember being in a college speech class and having to do a persuasive speech, and I chose why you should become a foster parent. And little did I know, I was already advocating for my daughter that was 2 years old and a county away. But he sure did. He knew that when I met Nathan and told him I may never want to have our own kids, that I felt called to foster care and adoption, that he would jump right on board this crazy train. He knew. He knew that by giving me this daughter, he would also give my little sister a best friend. Sometimes they're more like sisters. And that even though their stories are different, they're also the same. I remember feeling this burning feeling in my gut from age 17 to 21 when we took our first placements, that this is what I was meant to do, and even told Nathan at one point that it was such a strong feeling that I was almost scared of not doing it because it would feel like disobeying what God had asked me to do. Now I think I understand that burning feeling. I think it was just him drawing me to this, so I wouldn't miss out on my Mariah or our other 2 kiddos, because he knew. So thankful for all of the things he knows and does for us, and for his grace and provision. This journey has been one where I have to take one step at a time and sometimes step into the darkness and just trust the unseen. This story he's writing, it just makes me believe in his goodness even more.
Good. That's really loud. So I just want to thank Grace and Raquel for coming and sharing their hearts. It's not easy to get up here in front of a church of people and talk, and I speak from experience because I don't like to do it myself. But there's a few things up here that you guys are going to see, and you guys can read those right now if you want to. Nikki's going to post these after church on the Facebook page. But I just wanted to kind of wrap up with a challenge for us as believers. God has shared this message with Janae and I, and God has been within our story since the beginning of our marriage. She was in foster care when we got together, and lo and behold, God has brought me into that same field of work in a way that I couldn't have imagined myself. And as Grace and Raquel shared, it's not easy being a caseworker. It's not easy being a foster parent, but it's so worth it. Parents in this room, just ask yourselves, are you the perfect parent? I know as a parent myself, I could say, no, I'm not a perfect parent, but does that mean that we're not called to parent orphans or called to be in the lives of so many youth in our community, so many youth in our state that just need a loving home? So many kids in our state and in this nation grow up in homes that they don't see what the love of Christ looks like. They don't see what a family, what stability looks like. And as believers, we have a Heavenly Father that shows us that on a continual basis. He shows us what stability is. He shows us what love is. He shows us what unconditional care for our hearts, for our souls is like. And as believers, it's our job to reflect that among everybody that we come in contact with. And I believe that foster care, I believe that adoption, I believe that respite care, as we talked about, is a way for us to do that. So if you're not feeling that tug on your heart to become a foster parent, to go out, as Grace said, and sign up to become a foster parent, that's okay. As Raquel said, there's so many other ways that we can be impactful for those youth in care, be impactful for those youth that are struggling in their homes right now. We can educate ourselves, as one of these points says. Educate yourself on what trauma looks like. Educate yourself on what instability in a home looks like. As teachers, I know we've got several educators in this room. Educate yourself on what neglect looks like, what abuse looks like, and ask yourselves, can I be that voice for a student that comes in my class every day that I realize is hurting, that I realize is not well, and stand up and make a call. Or maybe it looks like providing money or providing assistance to a bio family, a family that you know is struggling, a family that you know is dealing with domestic violence or dealing with abuse. Be their voice, be their teammate. We have in our field of study or field of work what's called child and family team meetings, and it's a meeting where we bring families and we bring youth in care together with service providers, with counselors, with teachers, with coaches, with all these people that can surround them and be that extra voice, be that extra teammate for them. So maybe that's what you can be. Maybe that's what God is calling you to be. Maybe He's calling you to step up and be a part of one of those child and family team meetings and be somebody that a bio mom or a bio dad can call up if they need a ride to a service, or if they need an extra hand to help them with something around the house to get their home up to par so that they can keep their child in care. So I just ask that you would just pray today, that you would search your hearts and ask God what He is calling you to do to be a part of this, to be a part of growth for our youth and in care, to be a part of growth for our kids in our community. There's so many kids just in Cesar alone that I know have been affected by this system. And so it's not something that's foreign. It's not something that doesn't happen in Southern Illinois because we're such a tight-knit community. It happens everywhere, regardless of if we want it to happen or not. So I just ask that you guys would pray, ask God how He can use you to help make an impact in our youth's lives. And as a caseworker, I will say, as Raquel mentioned, teenagers in care need so much help because people just count them out. Most of my caseload is teens that have been in the system for most of their lives, and they felt counted out time after time after time, and they felt like nobody can be there for them. So maybe that's where your focus is shifted to. Maybe you pray for a specific teen that you know is in care, or a specific teen that you know is dealing with this, and ask how you can be a teammate for them as well. So I'm going to close in prayer, and as I mentioned, Nikki's going to post these up on Facebook later. And I just ask that as we sing, we sing out worship songs to God, I just pray that if you feel that nudge on your heart, please come and talk to Janae or I or Grace or Raquel. Janae and I are going to be over here as prayer partners, so you guys can come up here and we can pray for you then, or if you want to catch us after service, that's fine. But if you're feeling God calling you to become a foster parent or become a teammate for somebody that you know is struggling with, please don't let that just fade away. Please speak up and be that voice, because we have so many youth in care that need it. Okay, so would you pray with me? Father, we just thank you for your message today, God. I thank you for all that you're doing in and through Grace and Raquel and Luke and Janae and myself as workers. I just pray that as a community of believers, that you would call us out, God. Call us into action today for so many youth around this nation, for so many youth around this world, God. You have called us yourself as a good Father to follow, and you lead us day by day, step by step. You don't show us what the full map is going to look like, Lord, but you tell us what our next step is like. And I just pray for us today that you would help us to see what your next step in our lives is with regard to adoption, with regard to orphans, with regard to foster care. And if you're calling somebody in this room right now, if this was the message that they needed to hear to make that step, Lord, I pray that they wouldn't shy away from that, Lord. I pray that they would boldly step into that, trusting, Lord, that you're going to provide, that you're going to be there in the times that they feel insignificant, or the times that they don't feel like they can parent another child. I just pray that you would show them the way, give them the strength to do so, God. And we just pray and thank you for just the love that you continually give to us, Lord, the stability that you demonstrate in our lives and through your life, Lord, on this earth. Jesus, we just thank you for the compassion that you show for us, and we just pray that we would be those compassionate believers that show love and just support to all those around us, Lord. We just pray that you would help us to be the hands and feet of Jesus outside of this church. So we just thank you, and we just pray all these things in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen.